Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world where your alarm clock is a rooster, your bed is a wooden slab next to a pile of coal, and your job is to swing a hammer at glowing metal until your arms feel like noodles. You're not a knight or a noble, but you're the reason they're armed and armoured. Welcome to the soot-stained, iron-hot world of a medieval blacksmith. You wake up coughing, not because you're sick, although honestly, you might be, but because the air in your little workshop maybe is thick with last night's charcoal smoke. Your eyes sting a bit. The sun hasn't fully risen yet, but there's already a glow coming from the forge. That's not romantic candlelight. It's the embers from yesterday's shift that never quite went out. You roll off your creaky straw mattress, stretch your aching back, and prepare for the daily ritual. Getting covered in soot, sweat, and the tears of regret from not becoming a baker like your cousin Thomas. Bakers at least get bread. You get iron flakes stuck in your skin. First task of the morning, stoke the forge. You shovel in chunks of charcoal and give the bellows a few hearty pumps. It takes rhythm and patience, kind of like playing the bagpipes, if the bagpipes could melt your face off. Your arms already ache, and you haven't even picked up a hammer yet. Now let's be real for a second. Being a blacksmith sounds cool on paper. You're forging swords, making armour, shaping horseshoes. But here's the dramatic reality check. You probably won't survive this job long enough to enjoy it. Your life expectancy? Let's just say if you make it past 45 with both lungs still functioning, you're the village unicorn. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead and drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing how far we travel together each night. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your day truly begins when the first client of the morning bangs on the shop door. It's a farmer, hunched and cranky, with a broken plough and the social skills of a bag of turnips. He wants it fixed yesterday. You nod politely, even though inside your head, you're screaming. This is plough number 3 this week. You lift the hunk of twisted iron with a groan and toss it beside the forge. Time to heat it, hammer it, shape it, cool it, and hope it doesn't crack. Repeat this 5 times a day for different tools, and welcome to your job description. While the metal heats, you prep your workspace. Tongs, hammer, chisel. Your anvil, by the way, weighs more than you do. It's the same one your father used. Same dents, same chips, same sense of looming regret. You grab the red-hot ploughshare with the tongs and slam it down on the anvil. The clang echoes down the street. The chickens scatter. A dog howls. Somewhere in the distance, a baby starts crying. Welcome to your contribution to the village ambience. Bang, clang, bang. You hammer it back into shape while sweat drips from your eyebrows into your beard, sizzling on your chest like you're a human frying pan. Your shirt? It was brown once. Now it's an ombre of black, grey and hopelessness. Fun fact, blacksmiths were often one of the highest paid labourers in the village. That is, when they got paid at all. Boltering was the name of the game. Some days you get coins, other days a bag of onions. Once, someone paid you with a piglet. That piglet ran away before you could even name it. You still miss Kevin. And let's talk about the forge itself. That roaring fire you depend on. It's hotter than Hades and completely unregulated. No thermostats here. Just you, some bellows, and prayers to Saint Elegius, the patron saint of metalworkers. Seriously, you mutter a little, "Help me, Elegius," every time the flames shoot higher than your eyebrows. Now here's something wild. Historians say that medieval forges could reach up to 2000 DGF, about 1100 DG. That's hot enough to melt most of your hopes and dreams. It's also hot enough to cause second-degree burns in a fraction of a second. One misplaced coal, and congratulations, you're screaming into the afternoon. Some scholars argue that blacksmiths had a certain level of social clout. After all, you were essential. No weapons, no farming tools, no horseshoes without you. But that didn't stop villagers from treating you like a human vending machine. If a nobleman wanted a new sword by Thursday, you'd better deliver it. Or else. Or else what? Well, maybe nothing. Or maybe your shop mysteriously catches fire. Some think rival smiths were behind more than a few accidents. Scholars still debate how often competition led to sabotage in medieval towns. But let's just say, you always slept with one eye open, especially when your work was getting noticed. Back to the plough. Its shape now. You dunk it into the water barrel with a hiss and a thick cloud of steam. You inhale it like second-hand punishment. The metal hardens. The client nods. He tries to haggle. You resist the urge to throw the plough at him. Instead, he gives you a bag of stale walnuts and waddles away. Welcome to medieval capitalism. Sometimes you think about switching careers, maybe becoming a minstrel or a monk, but then you remember you don't play an instrument, and you definitely snore too loud for monastery life. A few kids pass your shop window, peering in at the glowing forge with wide eyes. They think it looks magical. It does, if you don't know better. They call you Fire Master. That's kind of nice. The nickname makes its way around town. You allow yourself a brief, soot-streaked smile. And just when you think you'll get 5 minutes to sit down, another customer shows up. This one's different. He's wearing a faded surcoat and limping slightly. A retired knight. He wants you to repair an old family sword. You take the blade in your hands. It's notched, rusted, and crooked, but it still holds a kind of dignity. As you examine it, he watches you like the sword is a part of his soul. You nod solemnly. "Come back in 2 days," you say. He thanks you, and just like that, you're reminded why you do this. Because even though your lungs hate you, your skin is always burned, and your bones feel like they're auditioning for a medieval skeleton crew. You're shaping legacy. One clang at a time. You close the door, light the forge again, and pick up your hammer. The day is only beginning. The smoke from the forge still lingers in your nose as you pause to gulp a bit of warm ale. It's not exactly refreshing, but it's wet, and at this point your standards are lower than the village well. You wipe your face with a soot-stained sleeve and sigh. Your hammer hand already feels sore. But then again, you're lucky. You're not the apprentice anymore. Ah, the apprentice. Poor Osric. He's 17, wiry, and still looks slightly terrified of the tongs. Which is fair, considering he once dropped a half-molten horseshoe on his own foot. He limped for a week, swore he'd become a scribe instead, then came back the next morning. Why? Because the life of a blacksmith apprentice might be soul-scorching, but it's one of the only ways for someone like him to avoid farming turnips or dying in a mud pit during wartime. Being an apprentice isn't just hard, it's humiliating. The path to mastery in your trade starts not with a glorious swing of the hammer, but with sweeping. Lots and lots of sweeping. Soot piles, ash mounds, horse dung. And that's just before breakfast. You remember when you started? Maybe you were about 12. Your hands were too small to grip the sledge properly, and your master, a broad-chested man named Godric with a voice like a collapsing roof, would bellow, "Too soft," again, every time your swing was a millimetre off. You weren't allowed near the good tools. In fact, for the first 2 years, your most common job was fetching charcoal. And let me tell you, charcoal sacks are like medieval gym memberships. You get buff from carrying them, but it costs you your spine. Some historians believe blacksmith apprenticeships could last up to 7 years. 7. That's nearly a decade of being yelled at, burned, and blamed for everything that goes wrong. From a cracked sword blade to someone's missing goat. It later turned up, by the way. In the bakery. And don't even think about sleep. You bunk in the rafters of the workshop, right above the forge. Cozy? Not exactly. It's hotter than a summer latrine, and the smoke finds its way into every crevice of your lungs. You wake up coughing and go to bed coughing. Scholars still argue whether the mortality rate among blacksmith apprentices was significantly higher than other trades. There was also the delightful tradition of hazing. Oh yes, just because your job was brutal didn't mean your fellow apprentices weren't going to torment you anyway. Some of them thought it was hilarious to replace your cooling barrel with a slot bucket. You dunk red-hot iron into that mess once, and you'll never forget the smell. Still, you learned. You learned how to judge the colour of iron, dull white for shaping, yellow-white for welding. You learned that hammering wasn't just brute force, it was rhythm, finesse, timing. Blacksmithing was like music, only louder and with more burns. Eventually you graduated from sweeping to shaping nails. That's right, hundreds and hundreds of nails. Some masters made their apprentices hammer out 10 a day, others demanded 50, because if you can't make a straight nail, you sure heck can't make a horseshoe. Did we mention the customers? Oh yes, they love to blame the apprentice. The blade's not sharp enough, your boy's useless. The door hinge squeaks, that apprentice needs more beatings. Their cow limps because it tripped over a rock. Must have been the fault of that skinny kid at the forge. You build a thick skin. Not just literally, your hands become calloused and cracked like bark, but mentally too. By the time you can finally touch the forge without flinching, you've learned to keep your mouth shut, your head down, and your swing steady. There's an old blacksmith saying, "One apprentice teaches you patience, 2 teach you pain." That's why you only ever took on 1. You glance over at Osric now. He's sweating through his tunic while trying to polish a hinge without dropping it. You remember that expression. The constant mix of anxiety, concentration, and low-level fear. Osric, you cool? He jumps. That's iron polish, not soup. Don't drink it. He looks embarrassed. You chuckle quietly and shake your head. Here's a strange fact. In some villages, blacksmiths were thought to have magical powers. There's even folklore in parts of Europe that says a blacksmith's apprentice had to prove his soul wouldn't be corrupted by flame. One bizarre tale tells of a master who made his apprentice stand barefoot on hot coals to show his commitment. Modern scholars think that's exaggerated, of course. But honestly, you wouldn't be surprised. Some parts of the apprenticeship aren't written in any handbook, like how you learn to avoid overthinking, or how to get your balance back when swinging heavy tools, or the little trick of sticking a wet rag under your collar to keep cool, until it dries in 10 minutes and turns into a crusty relic of former comfort. You think about your old master sometimes, Godrich. He died in his sleep after eating too much salted pork. You inherited his forge, his anvil, and a list of clients that still haunt your dreams. One of them, a local brewer, still complains that you're not as fast as Godric was. Of course, Godric didn't have a limp and a village full of broken cartwheels. Still, you press on. The cycle continues. Apprentice becomes journeyman. Journeyman becomes master. And somewhere down the line, a young fool walks into your forge asking to learn. Why? Who knows? Maybe because blacksmithing still has that flicker of glory, that sense that you're doing something real, something lasting. You look down at your calloused hands. They're black with soot, cracked at the knuckles, and stronger than they've ever been. This life has burned you, bent you and hammered you into shape. And yet, you endure. The forge roars behind you. Osric groans as he drops a tool again. You sigh and get up, ready to show him how to hold the tongs without turning them into a catapult. It's a brutal life, but it's yours. By midday, the forge is alive, roaring, spitting sparks and glowing like some angry god stuffed inside a brick cave. The air inside your workshop is thick, not just with smoke, but with heat that clings to your skin like a desperate ghost. Your shirt, if you're even wearing one anymore, is plastered to your body in a patchwork of sweat, soot, and something that smells vaguely like despair. Osric has retreated to the corner, fanning himself with a piece of broken shield wood, eyes wide and lips parched. You don't blame him. You're pretty sure your own eyebrows are trying to abandon ship. Now, let's talk about safety gear. Oh, wait. There isn't any. No goggles, no gloves, no boots with reinforced toes. You've got a rough leather apron, a pair of rusting tongs, and your own questionable reflexes. That's it. If a chunk of hot slag decides to fly off and land on your arm, well, congratulations. You now have a new scar to add to the collection. Your arms already look like a battlefield. Little burns, puckered scars, the occasional blackened patch of skin where you forgot just how hot the metal was. And don't even get started on your hands. Between the calluses, the cracks, and the fact that your fingernails have basically given up on being nails, They resemble something closer to tree bark than human flesh. You're not alone in this, though. Every blacksmith you know bears the same badges of honour, or horror, depending on your outlook. There's Hob from 2 towns over. He lost the tip of his left ear when a chunk of molten bronze leapt from the crucible like it had something to prove. And old Anselm, he once sneezed while hammering and smashed his own thumb so badly that his nail turned black and fell off. 3 times. And then there's the fire itself. Always the fire. It's your friend and your enemy. It gives you heat, power, and the ability to shape metal like clay. But it also wants to kill you. And it's very, very patient. You've had close calls, like the time your bellows burst mid-stroke and nearly set the thatch roof on fire. Or when Osric tripped and flung a pair of glowing tongs across the room like a medieval discus. You still have a burn on your thigh that looks suspiciously like a sad face. Some historians believe blacksmiths in the Middle Ages actually had one of the most dangerous jobs outside of warfare, not only because of the burns, but because of the sheer volume of repetitive stress. Swinging a hammer over and over again isn't just tiring, it warps your spine, ruins your joints, and turns your elbows into ticking time bombs. There's also the hearing loss. Let's be real, this job is loud. You're not tapping on a drum here, you're smashing metal with metal over an anvil while a fire crackles behind you and tools clatter like angry tin soldiers. The noise is constant, relentless. It drills into your ears and stays there long after the day is done. You used to hear birds in the morning. Now it's just a faint ringing, like a choir of annoyed bees trapped in your skull. And yet, you carry on. Today, you've got to forge 3 new axe heads for the lumbermen. Simple work, but unforgiving. The iron bars are waiting, heavy and cold. You lift one with a grunt and slide it into the flames. Within minutes, it's glowing red-orange. You grab the tongs, pull it free and position it on the anvil. Then comes the hammer. Bang, bang, bang. The rhythm returns. It's almost hypnotic, like a heartbeat made of steel. You start to lose yourself in it. The way the metal bends beneath your strikes. The way the sparks fly like fireflies on a rampage. The way the heat surrounds you, invading your bones and making the outside world feel impossibly distant. You remember someone once said that blacksmithing was like taming a dragon. You don't kill the beast, you feed it, listen to it, shape it. And if you stop paying attention, it devours you. Halfway through the second axe head, your grip slips. Just a fraction of a second. But the hammer misses its mark and glances off the edge of the anvil. The jolt shoots up your arm like lightning. Your knuckles throb instantly. You curse under your breath. Not loudly, because Osric is watching, and you're still trying to maintain some semblance of dignity. But it hurts. Bad. You shake out your hand, stretch your fingers, and keep going. Because what else are you going to do? Go beg the reeve for a spot in the village militia? That's not happening. You've got a forge, a hammer, and more orders than you can count. Here's a strange little tidbit. Some blacksmiths in the early Middle Ages actually refused to work with certain metals. Tin, for example, was considered cursed by a few fringe groups. Too soft, too impure. Others avoided bronze because it reminded them of old pagan idols. Weird? Maybe. But when you work this closely with fire and metal, superstition starts to make sense. And here's something scholars still debate, whether blacksmiths were really as feared as the stories claim. In some places they were thought of as alchemists, mysterious figures who could twist nature's raw elements into something deadly or divine. In others, they were just regular tradesmen, grumpy and perpetually sweaty. You've seen both sides. There's the villager who bows slightly when you hand him a sharpened blade, as if you've just performed a sacred rite. And then there's the noble servant who sneers, tosses you a coin, and tells you to hurry it up, hammer boy. Either way, nobody understands what it's like to stand this close to fire every day, to feel your skin tighten from the heat, to taste iron in the back of your throat, to wonder if you'll ever stop smelling like roasted misery. By the time you finish the third axe head, your arms feel like they've been tenderized. You dunk the hot blade in the water barrel, watching the steam rise like a ghostly snake. The hiss is satisfying, like the forge is exhaling after holding its breath all day. Osric claps weakly. "They look sharp," he says. You nod. "Let's just hope the lumbermen don't use them on each other." He chuckles nervously. You hand him the tools to start grinding the edges smooth. He takes them with both hands, already fumbling. You sigh and sit down on the worn stool in the corner, one leg shorter than the rest, just like you. The day's not over, not even close. But for a moment, you let yourself breathe. Let the sound of Osric's scraping replace the clangs. Let the forge's warmth settle around you like a blanket instead of a threat. Your burns ache, your ears ring, your hands twitch with every heartbeat. And still, you wouldn't trade it. Not because you love pain, but because in a world where so much falls apart, you get to shape things. You get to build, forge, fix, mend. And that's something. The clangs begin to fade into the rhythm of the afternoon. Your body wants rest, but your workbench has other ideas. Lined up like little metal monsters are broken blades, dull shears, a twisted rake head, and, oh joy, a noble ceremonial dagger snapped clean in half. Just the kind of task that requires delicacy, which you're famous for avoiding. You haul yourself up from the stool and drag the broken dagger over. It's thin, overly decorated, and practically useless for anything except poking someone's ego. But the noble wants it repaired, not because he plans to use it, but because it belonged to his grandfather and looks pretty in the dining hall. Right. Nothing says appetizing like a murder stick mounted above the breadbasket. You flip the blade around, inspecting the tang and hilt. The craftsmanship is questionable. Too many frills, not enough function. Someone in a city smithy likely made it. Probably a guy who's never had to fix a wagon wheel or make a hoe for a farmer. You mutter something unflattering about ornamental smiths and pull open your drawer of tools. Now, let's take a moment to appreciate your medieval toolbox. You've got hammers of all shapes and weights, each one lovingly worn into something only you can wield properly. Tongs, more variations than you can count, flat jar, pickup scrolling, and one pair you're pretty sure is cursed because they never glip right. Then there are chisels, punches, swidges, fullers. It's like a blacksmith's version of a magic kit, except instead of pulling rabbits out of hats, you're pulling hot metal out of death's waiting hands. Your favourite tool, though, is your hammer. Not the biggest one, not the shiniest, but the one with the slight crack in the handle that fits your grip perfectly. You've had it for years, fixed the shaft twice. It's the kind of tool you could use blindfolded and still strike true. You once used it to scare off a drunk tax collector too, but that's another story. You set the dagger carefully on the small anvil you reserve for intricate work and begin preparing the join. Fixing a broken blade is delicate business, especially when you're working with high-carbon steel or something fussy like pattern-welded iron. Some smiths would reforge the entire piece. You're not that generous. You're going to heat it, align the fracture, and weld it back with just enough overlap to make it seem seamless. Here's a fascinating historical detail. Blacksmiths didn't always make tools from scratch. A large portion of their work was repair. This was a world without mass production. Things had to be fixed, not thrown away. You might spend days reshaping a blade or hours replacing the iron lip on a wagon wheel rim. It was honest work, sure. Back to the dagger. You carefully file the break. It's like a jigsaw puzzle piece. But the punishment for a wrong fit isn't just failure. It's noble wrath. You don't want that. You get the forge hot again and ease the blade in. The metal begins to glow. Not too much. Just enough to fuse. Bang. Tap. Bang. You nudge the halves together. You clamp the piece and wait. The sound of the forge fills the room again, and you feel your heartbeat sinking to it. Blacksmithing isn't just about force. It's about feel. Listening to the metal, watching how it bends, responding to its language. And if that sounds romantic, remember, this is the same job where one wrong swing can send a shard of iron into your face like a razor blade frisbee. Osric tiptoes over with the grindstone and starts sharpening one of the axe heads. You catch him trying to glance at your work. He's learning, slowly. You don't say anything, just let him watch. Once the weld cools, you inspect it. The join is nearly invisible. A success, but you're not done yet. The decorative filigree needs realignment, and that means etching and engraving tasks you secretly loathe. You pull out your engraving tools, thin, sharp instruments made by your own hand. Engraving is slow work, painful work. Your fingers cramp, your eyes blur. But it's part of the job, especially when you're working for clients who care more about looks than utility. Some blacksmiths avoided this kind of work entirely, preferring to focus on utilitarian tools. Others specialized in it, becoming renowned for their craftsmanship. The legendary swordsmiths of Toledo and Damascus. They weren't just but you're somewhere in between, a village workhorse with just enough finesse to fake aristocratic flair when needed. You finish the filigree with a final flick of the graver, stand up and stretch your back until it pops in 3 different places. You hand the repaired blade to Osric with a warning, "If you drop this, I'll turn your shoes into nails." He nods solemnly and sets it on the display shelf. A breeze floats in through the half-open door, stirring the smoke in lazy circles. Outside, you hear distant hammering from the farrier's shed, and the occasional bleating of an angry goat. Just another symphony in the countryside. Now, for something unusual. Did you know that some blacksmiths believed certain tools could remember their purpose? Sounds ridiculous, but a few smiths swore that hammers used only for weapons would resist when used on farming tools, and vice versa. Total nonsense? Maybe. But when you've spent decades coaxing fire into obedience, you start assigning feelings to your tools. Your hammer does feel different when making a sword versus a plowshare. And as for debates, scholars still argue about the exact origin of the iconic double-horn anvil. Some say it began in the Roman smithies. Others insist it came from northern Europe around the 10th century. All you know is, yours has both horns, one curved and one flat, and you've smacked metal against every inch of it. The afternoon fades, but your forge burns on. A local tailor stops by next, asking for more needles. You hate making needles. They're tiny, annoying, and disappear the moment you drop them. You nearly went blind last time trying to heat one with your tongs. Still, business is business. You forge 4, drop one. Osric finds it in the hay pile. You nearly cry with gratitude. Then comes a farmer with a broken scythe. Then a messenger asking for horseshoe nails. Then a woman demanding a lock repaired before her mother-in-law arrives. Because that door hasn't shut properly in 2 winters. You fix it with a sigh. And all the while, your tools move in and out of your hands like extensions of your will. The chisel for splitting, the hardy tool for cutting, the punch for punching, obviously. Each one worn down over years, each one shaped by your grip. You once tried replacing your favourite fuller with a new one. It felt wrong, too clean, too perfect, like trying to write a letter with someone else's hand. By sunset, your tools are glowing from overuse. Your arms feel like someone attached angles to your shoulders, and your stomach growls loud enough to startle Osric, who's fallen asleep face down on a sack of coal. Again, you let out a breath. Wipe your forehead. Your apron looks like it went 10 rounds with the chimney. You're exhausted. Your tools are tired. Even the forge seems to be sighing in exhaustion. But tomorrow, you'll pick them up again. The tongs, the hammer, the punch, the tools of your trade, and your survival. Because when everything else in this world feels breakable, these tools, and the fire they serve, remain steady. You wake up sore. Not the normal kind of sore. This is the kind of ache that's baked deep into your bones. The kind that comes from years of swinging hammers and hauling anvils. Your legs protest. Your shoulders feel like splintered beams, and your hands, well, they haven't felt normal in years. Just swollen, stiff, and dusted with iron grit. And guess what? It's barely dawn. The rooster hasn't even started screaming yet, but you're already up, because, surprise, you're behind, again. The backlog is the size of a cathedral and twice as heavy. Everyone wants something. A blacksmith's schedule is not his own. It belongs to every farmer, knight, merchant, priest and peasant with a broken hinge or a bent blade. You splash some cold water on your face, your only bath of the day, and head out to the workshop. The forge is cold. You forgot to bank the coals last night. That's on you. Now you've got to start from scratch, which means chopping more kindling and coaxing life into the lifeless hearth. You mutter to yourself as you work. Charcoal gods, be merciful. Or something like that. You're not even sure anymore. Maybe you're just talking to your tools at this point. Osric stumbles in, hair like a rat's nest, eyes barely open. He grunts in your direction and immediately trips over a barrel of scrap. Good morning. Once the fire is breathing again, low, rhythmic and red-eyed, you check the day's slate. There are 5 orders still unfinished. 2 ploughshares, a spear tip, a horseshoe set, and a fancy candelabra for the church, because apparently God needs symmetrical lighting. You pick up the nearest job, a ploughshare for a farmer named Tildrick, who always pays late and always complains early. The piece was dropped off 3 days ago, and he's already sent his daughter twice. You heat the iron bar. Bang, clang, repeat. The forger's song begins again, percussion for peasants. You hammer the metal flat, stretch it into the wide, scooping shape that will drag through dirt and rock. The sweat comes early. It stings your eyes. You blink it away and keep swinging. There's no such thing as a sick day. If you're too ill to work, you just don't earn. You remember the time you caught the fever, couldn't lift a hammer for nearly a week. By the time you recovered, your landlord was threatening eviction, your debts had stacked up, and you were pretty sure someone tried to steal your bellows. This job doesn't pause. The village doesn't pause. Life does. Here's a grim historical nugget. Most medieval tradesmen worked from sunup to sundown, 6 days a week. Sundays were rest days, but even then, if someone showed up with a busted sword and a fat purse, guess who was hammering during Vespers? Even worse, you don't just make things, you maintain them. Nothing lasts forever. Hose crack, sword hilts loosen, doors break, armour dents. And since metal was expensive, most villagers weren't buying new things. They were bringing you their old, half-rotted ones and expecting miracles. You once repaired the same iron gate 5 times in 2 months. It was rusted through, full of holes, and leaned like a drunk nobleman. But the owner insisted it was good stock. Right, good stock with termites. In the metal. Tildrick arrives mid-morning, as predicted, wearing his usual frown and clutching a bag of turnips. You done yet? You hand him the finished ploughshare with a look that could sharpen steel. He squints at it, looks smaller than the last one. You clench your jaw. It's exactly the same size, down to the breath. He shrugs and drops the turnips on your bench like you've been paid in rubies. See you next week. You won't. But he'll be back. Osric snickers from the side of the workshop. You glare at him. That'll be you in 10 years. He goes pale. Let's talk about demand. Blacksmiths aren't just blacksmiths. You're the hardware store, the mechanic, the weapons dealer, and the emergency locksmith all rolled into one. One minute you're fixing a broken hoe, the next you're trying to create a custom bracket for the mill wheel. Then someone shows up with a mysterious iron rattle that needs adjusting. You don't even know what it is, but they expect you to fix it. And don't forget the nobles. Oh, they're the best. They send their squires to your door with folded scrolls describing some elaborate request, like a sword with silver inlays, an engraved pommel, and a sheath lined with velvet. You quote a time frame and a price. The squire nods. Then the noble shows up, 2 days later demanding it early and for less. You tried to stand up to one once, Baron Eldrick. He wanted a custom crest etched into his armour. You explained that engraving would take an extra week. He didn't like that. Sent his men to encourage you. One of them dumped your water barrel into the street. The forge nearly burned your workshop down. Lesson learned. But not all customers are a nightmare. There's the old widow who brings you broken hinges and insists on paying you in stew and stories. Or the quiet knight who tips well and always nods like you're saving his life with every sharpened blade. Moments like those make it bearable. Almost. Now for something odd. Did you know some blacksmiths used to schedule their work around the moon, especially when making weapons? They believed certain lunar phases affected the strength of the steel. Modern science calls that nonsense, but hey, when your job is 90% fire, you start to look upward for help. And here's a scholarly debate for you. Some argue that blacksmiths were technically free men, not bound to feudal lords like peasants were. Others claim that, due to taxes and local obligations, most smiths were just glorified serfs with nicer tools. Judging by the number of tithes you're expected to pay and the gifts the reeve collects each month, you're leaning toward the latter. Speaking of tithes, you hear the church bell ring. Midday. You take a break, not because you want to, but because your stomach threatens to rebel. Lunch is a hunk of bread, a chunk of cheese, and a smear of something vaguely vegetable-like. You sit on a stump outside the forge, watching smoke curl from the chimney like a snake that's too lazy to slither. Osric joins you, gnawing on a carrot. "Master," he says through a mouthful, "do you think we'll ever catch up on the orders?" You stare at the horizon. "No." He nods solemnly. "Thought so." You both sit in silence, chewing like barn animals. After lunch, it's back to the forge. No fanfare, no time for digestion. Another horseshoe. Another blade. Another hinge. Your tools are beginning to wear. You can feel it in their handles. The wood is splintering. The metal heads don't swing quite like they used to. You'll need to replace them soon, which means more work. For yourself. Your apron smells like something crawled into it and died. You make a mental note to beat it with a stick later, maybe in a river, maybe into the river. As the sun begins its slow descent, your shoulders slump. The day isn't over, but your endurance is. Still, orders remain. The work doesn't stop. And that's the brutal, beautiful reality. You are the village's backbone, and sometimes that means no rest, no luxury, just iron and fire, and the quiet knowledge that if you weren't here, the wheels would stop turning. Quite literally. It's nearly evening now, and your bones creak like the hinges you've been fixing all day. You rub your shoulder, stretch your back until it pops, and glance around your forge. The place is an organised mess. Blackened walls, piles of scrap, a bench littered with unfinished jobs, and a layer of soot that has somehow managed to cover even the ceiling. You'd clean it, but there's always tomorrow. Maybe. You step outside for a breath of semi-fresh air. The village is bathed in golden light. Children are chasing each other barefoot, and someone's roasting something that actually smells edible. You allow yourself a moment to just exist. Then you hear it. Bang, bang, scree, clang. Nope, not from your forge. That lovely tune is coming from the workshop next door. Young Edwin, the new apprentice down the road, is working on his first full-size gate latch. Judging by the sound, he's either building a new invention or losing a fight with an anvil. You shake your head and smile grimly. We've all been there. You step back inside. Your ears are ringing, not metaphorically, literally. It's a high-pitched whine that's been your companion for the last 5 years. You didn't notice when it started exactly. One day it was just there, and now it hums along with the forge, the soundscape of permanent tinnitus. You remember your master telling you, "A smith without ringing ears is a smith who hasn't swung enough." At the time you thought he was being dramatic. Now you just hope you'll still be able to hear Osric when he inevitably knocks over another barrel. Let's talk about that soundtrack of your life for a moment. It starts at dawn with the rustle of coal and kindling. Then the bellows start groaning. Then the fire crackles to life. When the iron heats, it sizzles, angry and alive. And once you start working, well, it's a symphony of steel. Bang. Clang. Scrape. Hiss. Whack. It never really ends. Your ears are always on alert, tuned to the subtle differences. A dull thud. The hammer missed. A sharp ring. Good contact. A hollow clang. The piece cracked. Some blacksmiths in ancient texts even claimed they could hear when the metal was ready. It sounds mystical, but honestly, you believe it. When you've worked iron long enough, it does speak. Not with words, of course, but with temperature, colour, tension, and yes, sound. And the sound is loud. You don't wear earplugs. Those haven't been invented yet. What you do wear, unintentionally, is permanent damage. Your hearing now has selective memory. Birds? Mostly gone. Distant chatter? Depends on the wind. The clang of metal? That's the one thing you'll always hear. Osric once asked if he'd go deaf. You said yes. He laughed. You didn't. Even worse than the ringing is the screech. That awful metallic wail when you grind metal against stone. It slices through the forge like a blade through bread. It's the noise that lets the whole village know you're busy, and probably cranky. Some smiths avoid grinding altogether. They prefer filing. Slower, quieter, but when you've got 3 orders due by tomorrow, you don't have time for delicate. You go loud. You go fast. And that hiss. Oh, the hiss. You plunge a hot blade into the water trough, and the steam erupts like a dragon's breath. It smells like metal smoke and the ghost of every regret you've ever had. It sounds powerful, but also final. The hiss means the shape is set, the form is fixed, no going back. Funny thing is, villagers love that sound. They think it's cool. Kids sneak up to the workshop just to see the water explode and hear the forge roar. You've started playing it up for them. Just a little throwing in extra coals for a bigger plume. Let them believe there's magic here. And in a way, there is. Here's a historical oddity for you. In some Slavic villages, blacksmiths were considered keepers of sacred sound. The rhythmic hammering was thought to ward off evil spirits. Entire rituals were built around it. Weddings, harvest blessings, even exorcisms. You're not sure how true that is, but if your forge drives away demons, you'd like a written thank you. Of course, modern scholars argue about how much of that was folklore and how much was practical. Some believe the sounds of the forge simply masked more sinister things, like cries from punishment, or even the clamour of executions. Others say it was the closest thing to industrial noise before industry ever arrived. Either way, the sound is always there. The worst part? It follows you home. At night, when the forge is cold and the village sleeps, you lie in bed and still hear it. The ghost clang, phantom bangs, the occasional imagined hiss. You once jolted awake, thinking someone had dropped a sword. Turned out it was just the wind knocking over a pail. Your dreams, when you manage them, often feature sparks. Sometimes the sparks form shapes, tools, faces, even animals. Other times they're just sparks, floating in the dark. Tonight will be the same. You know it already. Another long day of noise has programmed your mind like a lute string pulled too tight. Still, there's one sound you don't mind. It's not the banging or the screeching. It's not even the hiss. It's the silence after. That brief, rare moment when the forge dies down, the bellows are still, and the air settles into something soft. You sit on your stool, sip stale water, and hear nothing but your breath and the crackle of a dying ember. It's a kind of peace only blacksmiths understand. Osric yawns dramatically, dragging a bundle of scrap iron toward the back of the shop. He drops it with a clatter that nearly gives you a heart attack. You rub your temples. Less noise? You mumble. Sorry, he says. Not sorry. You wave him off and stare at your hands. They don't stop trembling anymore. You tell people it's from the hammer. Maybe it is. Maybe it's just fatigue. Either way, you've adapted. You've learned how to work through the shake, how to hold things tighter, how to adjust your strikes. One of the older smiths in the next town has started going deaf in both ears. You visited him once. He shouted everything even when you were 2 feet away. His apprentice does most of the fine work now. You wonder if that'll be you in 5 years. 10, if you're lucky. But for now, The forge is still lit, the hammer still swings. And the sounds, deafening as they are, mean you're still part of the heartbeat of this village. Even if no one thanks you, even if no one hears you over the din. You rise from your stool and pump the bellows again. The forge roars back to life, and the music begins once more. Bang, bang, clangor, same as it ever was. By now your clothes have absorbed so much soot and sweat they could probably stand upright on their own and walk out of the forge. You tug at your collar, but it doesn't help. The heat doesn't just sit on your skin. It burrows in, settles deep into your chest and refuses to leave. Osric fans himself with an old scrap of parchment while eyeing the forge like it's a wild beast. You're beginning to think he might try throwing himself into the water trough. Honestly, you wouldn't blame him. You know what no one talks about? The air. Or rather, the total lack of clean air. You breathe in coal smoke, iron dust, hot ash, and whatever questionable elements drift in from the village latrines nearby. There's no ventilation, just a wide door and a few holes in the wall that do more to let in flies than let out fumes. The forge is burning bright again. You lean over it, tongs in hand, holding a half-finished scythe blade just above the coals. The heat licks up your arm, searching for a way through your crusted tunic. You squint against the glare. The orange glow pulses like a heartbeat. You feel it in your chest. That slow, heavy thud. Not your own heartbeat, the forge's. And every breath you take feels thick, like drinking smoke through a straw. Here's a not-so-fun historical truth. Medieval blacksmiths often suffered from what we'd now call chronic respiratory illness. They didn't have the vocabulary for it. They called it smith's wheeze, or simply the forger's cough. But the symptoms were the same. Shortness of breath, deep hacking chest tightness, and eventually... And it starts young. You cough sometimes. Not just in the morning, but in the middle of work. Deep racking coughs that scrape up your throat like iron shavings. You tell yourself it's just dust. It'll pass. But you know better. Osric doesn't know yet. He breathes like a puppy. Short, shallow, eager. His lungs are still clean. You wonder how long that will last. A year? He asks once, "Did your master ever cough this much?" You pause before answering. He coughed more. He doesn't ask again. And it's not just the lungs. It's your eyes. Constant squinting into flame, blinking through smoke, trying to focus on tiny details through a haze of heat waves and ash. Some blacksmiths went blind, or nearly so. You're already noticing your night vision's going, but it's the lungs that get you first. The charcoal is the real villain here. It burns hot, which is what you need, but it also releases a cocktail of particles and gases. Carbon monoxide, mostly. It's odorless, invisible, and deadly. If you fall asleep with the forge burning, you might not wake up at all. You learned that the hard way. Your old friend Darren, he was a smith up in Elmwood. Slept too close to the hearth one winter night. Never opened the back vent. They found him the next morning, lying half in and half out of his bed, eyes wide open, black under the fingernails, the forge still crackling beside him. The Reeve called it an accident. You call it forgetfulness. One small mistake after a long, tired day. That's all it takes. You walk around your own forge 3 times a night now, checking the coals, the air holes, the draft. It's part of your routine. Like brushing your teeth, if people actually did that here. Now, let's talk about how the heat really gets to you. It's not the burn of the fire on your skin. It's the exhaustion. The way it seeps into your muscles and makes every movement feel like you're dragging your limbs through molasses. You drink water constantly, but it never feels like enough. Your sweat turns to salt, your lips crack, your nose bleeds for no reason. Dehydration is a slow thief. You don't notice it at first. You just start forgetting things. Misplacing tools, skipping steps, zoning out. That's when accidents happen. You remember the time Osric nearly grabbed a blade with his bare hand because you forgot to warn him it was still hot. You grabbed his wrist just in time. That shook you. Not because of the danger, but because you were the danger. It's easy to romanticize the forge. People walk by and see the glow and say things like, "Ah, the heart of the village," or "What noble work." But they don't know. They don't breathe this life. They don't go to bed with their lungs rattling like a cracked bellows. Here's a strange historical fact. In some parts of Europe, blacksmiths used to smear lard inside their nostrils before working. Other smiths chewed pine resin to soothe their throats. You tried that too. Ended up choking on a chunk of bark. You'll stick to warm ale and bad decisions. And here's a debate you've heard more than once. Were medieval forgers really this deadly, or are modern historians exaggerating the dangers? Some say smiths adapted, that their bodies grew used to the environment. Others argue that the life expectancy stats don't lie. Personally, you think it depends on the smith, and how stubborn he is. You grab your water jug and drink. It's lukewarm, tastes like iron and wood. Still, it's something. Osric wipes his forehead with a rag that's somehow dirtier than his face. "Master," he says, "why don't you close the forge during summer, like some of the others?" You snort, because people don't stop breaking things just because they're sweating. He nods, but you can tell he's not convinced. You remember a summer so hot that the wax seals on your storage jars melted off. You lost 3 pounds in a week from sweat alone. You nearly fainted twice, but you kept going, because if you stop, they find someone else. The forge moves on without you. You dump more charcoal into the fire. The flames leap up, eager and angry. The smoke follows. You wave it away. There's no glamour in this. No poetry in the coughing fits. No beauty in the grime. Just work. Hot, endless, choking work. And still, you endure. Because someone has to keep the village running. Someone has to make the nails, the hinges, the ploughs, the weapons. Someone has to breathe smoke so others don't have to. You look at your hands again. Burned, cracked, strong. You know what they say, the smith breathes fire so the world doesn't have to. Tonight, that feels more literal than ever. The forge is quieter now, the flames still burning but subdued, like a tired animal curling in on itself. You lean against the workbench, rubbing your wrists, which have long since stopped obeying without complaint. Osric is sweeping ash into a corner, humming something off-key and proud of himself for remembering where the broom was this time. Just as you think you might get a moment of stillness, you hear the distinct sound of hooves. Slow, deliberate, heavy. The kind of hoofbeat that carries expensive shoes and even more expensive problems. You step to the doorway and, right on cue, see a nobleman's steward trotting toward the forge atop a fine grey horse. He's wearing clothes that scream, "I don't work for a living," and a scowl that suggests he's about to ask for a lot, give very little and expect a thank you afterward. You sigh and wipe your hands on your apron. The steward reins in the horse and glances down at you like he's not sure whether to speak or sneeze. "Master Blacksmith," he says with theatrical politeness. "Lord Aldrin requires 4 new arrowheads, a sword hilt adjusted, and a custom iron latch installed before week's end." You raise an eyebrow. That's 4 different jobs. Indeed, he doesn't dismount. The Lord would consider it a personal favour if they were given priority. Priority over what? Over the dozen other personal favours in my queue? The steward blinks like you've spoken in farm animal. You'll be compensated. You know what that means? Compensated with vague promises, inflated gratitude, and maybe a coin smaller than your thumbnail. You nod slowly. "I'll get to it." The steward smiles with all the warmth of a frozen fish. "See that you do," and then he's off, clomping back down the lane, leaving hoofprints and resentment in his wake. You've worked with nobles before. Every blacksmith does, eventually. It's unavoidable. They own everything. The land stock, the people. They think they own you too, and in a way, they kind of do. Sure, you're not a serf. You're technically a free tradesman, but freedom only goes so far, when a baron can ruin your business with a single bad word at court. You've seen it happen. A smith in the next village crossed a night. I was refused to rush an order that would have compromised the metal. The knight told the reeve the man was sluggish. A month later he had no customers. His forge went cold, so when a noble wants something, you nod and say, "Yes, my lord," with the same enthusiasm you'd use for drinking spoiled milk. Here's a curious historical tidbit. In some towns, blacksmiths were exempt from military service because they were considered essential. Their role in maintaining weapons and armour was so critical that taking them off the forge and throwing them onto the battlefield was seen as a waste of talent. But paradoxically, that meant they were even more tied to the nobility, because no war could run without them. And the demands weren't always sensible. One noble insisted you etch a poem into his breastplate, a poem he wrote. It was long, sentimental, and absolutely terrible. You nearly ruined the piece trying to fit it all in. He never even wore the armour, just hung it on the wall like a trophy. Probably tells visitors it was a gift from some legendary smith. You glance down at the scroll the steward left behind. It's sealed with red wax and smells faintly of lavender and entitlement. You don't bother opening it right away. Instead, you go back to your workbench and finish the latch you were crafting for the town baker. She asked you last week, said her pantry door wouldn't stay shut. She offered a small pie in exchange. Strawberry, if the season holds. You like her. She doesn't shout, doesn't make threats. She pays in kindness and flaky crusts. You slide the final bolt into place and test the latch. It clicks shut with satisfying finality. Simple, functional, honest. Unlike noble commissions, which are usually neither simple nor honest. Osric appears at your side. Do we have to do Lord Aldrin's job first? You glance at him. He's starting to ask more questions. That's a good sign. Means he's thinking. Means he's getting ready to stop being just a pair of arms and start becoming a smith. Yes, you say? Because if we don't, he'll make our lives harder. He frowns. But it's unfair. Welcome to life. He doesn't look away. But what if we said no? You give him a long look, the kind of look that's shaped by years of bruised knuckles and backroom threats. Then he finds someone else, someone cheaper, someone more desperate. And then, we don't eat. He looks down. The romantic vision of blacksmithing is fading for him, hammer strike by hammer strike. Some scholars argue that blacksmiths held a unique social position, part tradesman, part magician, part necessary evil. Nobles relied on you, but they rarely respected you. You crafted their swords, but you couldn't carry one. You forged their armour, but you couldn't wear it unless it was to test fit on someone your size. You were respected, feared, needed, and invisible. It's an odd balance. You're simultaneously central to the village's functioning, and yet socially disposable. You remember a time a noble came into your forge in person, a rare occurrence. He watched you work in silence for a few minutes, then asked, "Do you enjoy this?" You told him, "I enjoy doing it well." He didn't understand, thought it meant you were proud. He smiled condescendingly and said something about honest labour. He never came back. Back in the workshop, you finally open the scroll. It's worse than expected. The arrowheads must be barbed. The hilt must include a ruby, no smaller than a walnut. The latch is to be custom fitted with decorative flourishes, including the Aldrin family crest, which, by the way, includes a lion with a crown and a banner that reads, "Strength in Silence." You snort. Osric peers over your shoulder. "Do we have rubies?" You laugh. "Does dirt count?" He's still learning sarcasm. You set the scroll aside. You'll start the arrowheads tonight. You can't afford not to. But before that, you finish the baker's latch. You wrap it in a scrap of cloth and walk it over yourself. She smiles, hands you the promised pie, and invites you to sit for a moment. You decline. Too much to do. But you take a bite as you walk back. It's warm, flaky, slightly burnt on one edge, and perfect. For a moment, just a moment, the world makes sense. And then you remember the ruby-studded sword hilt, and the moment is gone, because this is the life of a medieval blacksmith. You serve everyone. and you answer to those who will never lift a hammer themselves. The sky is smeared with orange and violet now, the kind of dusky watercolour that makes poets sigh and blacksmiths groan, because it means there are only a few hours of light left, and far too much left to do. You finish wiping down your tongs, your arms trembling faintly from the steady beat of labour. Osric is nodding off near the coal pile again, sitting upright but slumped like a sack of tired potatoes. You nudge him with your boot. He blinks. I was just, listening to the fire. Sure you were? You look around your forge, the one constant in your life, and consider what comes next. Tonight's task is armour. Not a full suit, thank every saint in heaven, but enough to make you wish you'd become a thatcher instead. The noble wants 3 plates reshaped, a gorget tightened, and the vambraces rebent to fit a new squire's arm. Which is ironic, because this new squire probably hasn't swung anything heavier than a wine jug in his life. You haul the chest plate from its crate. It's not terribly heavy, if you've been swinging hammers for 20 years. But it's awkward, bulky, the kind of shape that makes you wish humans were born rectangular. Still, armour work is a bit of a dance. Not all brute force. You tap gently here, hammer firmly there, testing for resonance. It's as much sound as sight. A dull thunk, too thick. A ringing chime, just right. Armour crafting, contrary to what the bards might have you believe, wasn't all polished steel and ceremonial glory. Most of it was sweaty, tedious and mathematical. You had to understand angles, movement, pressure points. A chest plate wasn't just decoration. It had to deflect arrows, swords, and the occasional clumsy lance from an overzealous cousin. You reheat the piece and begin adjusting it on your dishing stump, a heavy rounded form specifically for shaping curves. Osric watches from a safe distance. He's learned that flying sparks are not good for eyebrows. You ever wear armour? He asks. You smirk. Once. He perks up. Really? Testing a new design. Bent forward and knocked myself unconscious on the anvil. He laughs until he snorts. Here's a real historical curiosity. In some towns, blacksmiths were required to test the armour they made, usually by wearing it and taking a blow from a wooden mallet. Some even had to stand against crossbow bolts to prove their craftsmanship. Most smiths faked it, of course. Rig demonstrations, blunt arrows, soft strikes. You don't blame them. Who wants to get shot just to prove you're good at your job? Still, armour isn't just metal. It's personal. Every dent tells a story. Every scratch is a near miss. Some knights bring in their gear not for repair, but for preservation. They point to the slash across the pauldron and say, "That's where I deflected a brigand's axe." You nod politely, even though you're pretty sure that brigand was probably a sheepdog. You once had to hammer out a breastplate with a perfect spear-sized puncture in it. The knight didn't survive, obviously. His brother brought it to you like it was a holy relic, asked you to seal the hole, polish it, and hang it above the family altar. You did. Not because of the money, but because that's what you do. You make the unwearable wearable, the broken whole, the dead remembered. Osric holds up a gauntlet and squints at it. Why do they want this so tight? Because they think being able to move is optional. He slides his hand into the armour and flinches. It pinches. You shrug. Better than being stabbed? That's the thing about armour. It's compromise. You want it light? It won't protect much. You want it strong? It's heavy. You want it beautiful? Good luck affording it. Some scholars argue that blacksmiths in the medieval period were more than craftsmen when it came to armour. They were artists, engineers and surgeons. A breastplate had to be shaped just right to allow breathing and still deflect an arrow. A helmet needed visibility, airflow and full coverage, none of which really get along. And the fit? Oh, the fit was everything. 1 inch too tight at the neck and the wearer faints from heat. 1 inch too loose at the armpit and a dagger finds its way home. You once saw a man faint getting into his own armour. Took 3 people to pry him out before he suffocated. You offered to widen the collar. He refused. Said style comes at a cost. He fainted again 2 weeks later. You finish rounding the chest plate, testing the curve with a wooden mallet. The sound is clear. You hold it up to the light and nod. It's good work. No one will notice, except maybe the squire, if he manages to lift his arms without getting a nosebleed. Then come the vambraces, bent out of shape from overuse, probably dropped or kicked or stored under something dumb like a barrel of wine or a sleepy donkey. You heat them, gently work them back into form. Osric watches, chewing on a carrot like it's a dramatic snack. "Do you think blacksmiths ever wore armour in battle?" he asks. You think about it. Maybe, if they had to, but we weren't made for charging. We were made for keeping everyone else from dying. In rare cases, blacksmiths did fight. During sieges they were called on to repair weapons mid-battle. Some took up arms themselves. There's a legend of a smith in Italy who charged into combat swinging 2 red-hot tongs. The enemy fled, not because of the tongs, but because they thought he was insane. Honestly, fair reaction. Osric laughs at that story. He likes the idea of madness over strategy. The armour is finished now. You lay it out on a bench to cool, the metal still whispering with heat. You place the pieces gently, like puzzle fragments waiting to be assembled on someone else's back. Then you wash your hands in the trough, though wash is generous. It's more like smearing the soot around. Your fingernails are permanently blackened, your palms a topographical map of burns and calluses. You gave up on having soft hands a long time ago. You settle back on your stool, letting your bones sink into stillness. The forge is dim now. The embers glow softly, a red pulse, like the heart of a sleeping dragon. And you think, not for the first time, that armour isn't just something you make. It's something you wear. Every day. Not steel plates, but layers of habit, tolerance, callous, and patience. You don't get to show pain. You don't get to stop. You wake up sore, you fall asleep sore, and you do it all again the next day. That's what blacksmiths do. You endure. The night settles in like a heavy wool cloak, thick, scratchy, and just a little bit damp from a day's worth of breath and smoke. You're still in the forge. Of course you are. Where else would you be? You've just finished stacking the cooled armour on a shelf that's leaning more each week. It groans under the weight of iron story. Outside, crickets chirp, dogs bark in the distance, and someone's probably getting into a drunken argument about chickens again. But inside your workshop, there's only the soft crackle of dying embers and the clank of you setting tools back in their places. You should rest, but the order list on your workbench says otherwise. Next up, horseshoes. You sigh and drag the bar of raw iron toward the forge. It's barely past the size of your arm, but you know how many nails and curves it holds inside. You've made hundreds, except when they go wrong. You reheat the forge, coaxing the embers back to life with the bellows. Osric is sweeping in half circles, still clumsy but trying, which is an improvement from 3 weeks ago when he accidentally swept a bucket of nails into the latrine. You glance at the shoes from earlier. They're rough, uneven. You could let it slide. The horse wouldn't complain. But the owner might. And one angry farmer with a limping horse can ruin your whole week. So, you redo them. As you hammer the heated bar into shape, the familiar clang returns, steady and numbing. Your mind drifts. You think of old Harl, the farrier who taught you horseshoes. He'd file them with such precision, you could swear the horses walked more proudly after he was done. He used to say, there are only 2 kinds of smiths, the ones who get it right the first time, and the ones who eventually stop lying about it. He died in a forge fire. Not a dramatic one, no explosion, no epic collapse, just an ember caught on an old hay-stuffed bench while he was in the back fetching a new rasp. The building went up in minutes. They found his hammer still warm beside the anvil. You finish the shoe, plunge it into the trough, and move on to the next. You remember the other kind of forge fire, the deliberate ones. Competition among smiths isn't always friendly. In towns where there's more metalwork than mouths to feed, jealousy spreads like rust. You've heard the stories, tools stolen in the night, bellows slashed, piles of precious charcoal doused with water. And the worst? The rivalries that end in a blaze. Years ago, you were one of 3 smiths in your village. One moved away after a feud with the tanner. The other? It started small. Accusations, whispers. He said you were undercutting him. You said he was poaching clients. One day, his apprentice came crying to your door, said the forge was burning. You ran through the streets with a bucket before anyone else even noticed the glow. But it was too late. They said it was an accident, a dropped coal, a cracked chimney, but you still wonder. He never rebuilt. Packed up and left with soot-streaked cheeks and a cart full of half-finished hinges. You never saw him again. You think about him when the wind shifts and the fire smells like fear. The thing is, forges are dangerous places, not just because of the fire and the molten metal and the smoke, but because everyone depends on you, and no one likes waiting. Some forge accidents are just that. Accidents. The bellows burst mid-pump. The anvil gives way after too many years. You once watched an apprentice trip into a slag pit and burn his foot through the boot. He recovered? Barely. Wears a limp like a medal now. But sometimes, it's sabotage. You've caught kids throwing wet cloth into your coals. Saw a rival's son sneak in once, likely sent by his father to spook you. You didn't report it, just made sure your door locked better after that. And then there's the most common cause of accidents. Exhaustion. When your muscles are shaking, when your mind is numb, when you're on your 30th piece of the day, the tongs slip, the metal bends, the hammer rebounds. You once nearly lost a toe when the anvil bucked during a shaping. Missed it by... Osric has seen it too. His hands tremble after long days. You can tell he's trying to hide it. He's too proud to admit he's tired. So were you once. You toss another horseshoe into the trough and exhale deeply. Do accidents happen a lot? He asks quietly. You nod. Everywhere. Even when you're careful. He swallows. Will I get burned? You look at his pale hands, barely scarred yet. Yes, but the trick is learning how not to get burned the same way twice. He nods, slower this time, like he finally understands. Here's something odd. In certain regions, smiths were considered cursed because they worked so close to fire. Villagers whispered about fire spirits living in the forge. If something went wrong, it wasn't your fault. It was the spirit, angry or offended. Some smiths left offerings, bits of bread, herbs, even ale near the hearth. You've never done that, but sometimes, when the flames jump too high for no reason, you still nod politely to the shadows, just in case. Scholars still argue whether medieval smiths truly believed in these spirits, or if it was just a way to blame the unexplainable. But you've worked long enough to know this. In a place where the air shimmers with heat and steel bends like clay, logic doesn't always feel like the ruling force. The last horseshoe cools, and you line them up neatly. 4 identical pieces of hard-earned utility. They won't win any awards. They won't hang in a noble's hall, but they'll carry a farmer's mule another 100 miles. And that matters, because for every sword you craft, there are 50 tools. For every fancy dagger or ornamental hinge, there are buckets, nails, hinges, and cart joints. The things no one thanks you for, the things no one notices until they're broken. That's the invisible side of blacksmithing. The endless, thankless labour that keeps the world from falling apart. You slump onto your stool, sweat-soaked and soot-caked. The forge flickers low. Osric douses the floor to keep the dust down, his motions slow and stiff. You look around your workshop and feel the ghost of 100 small disasters. But you're still here. The tools are still warm. And tomorrow, the hammer will fall again. Morning arrives, not like a gentle tap on the shoulder, but more like someone hurling a bucket of mud in your face. You wake up with a groan, your limbs stiff and your fingers curled into claws from gripping tools too long the day before. You stretch and crack and cough, the usual forge soundtrack of a body protesting the idea of continuing this endless cycle. Osric is already awake, or at least he's vertical. He's trying to light the forge, fumbling with the flint and tinder like he's never seen fire before. You watch him strike the flint 3 times in a row, each time aiming it away from the tinder pile. You raise a brow and shuffle over. Flint toward the tinder, Osric. You're not trying to set the sky on fire. He grins sheepishly and adjusts. After a few more strikes, the flame catches, a weak little wisp, but it grows. The forge breathes again, reluctantly, like it's as tired as the both of you. Today's work slate is heavier than your conscience after selling a sword to a man you knew was going to get into trouble. The town reeve needs gate hinges, the carpenter needs nails, a mercenary caravan passing through wants their swords sharpened, straight, and deadly. Their words, not yours. And the worst of it? You've got a new ache in your lower back that makes it feel like a blacksmith's anvil has taken up permanent residence in your spine. You try stretching. The ache just laughs and says, "Nice try, old man." So you get to it. First, the nails. Nails are your bread and butter, or at least your barley and bad cheese. No one thinks twice about nails, but they need them for everything. Buildings, carts, fences, barrels, coffins. You've made so many nails in your life that if someone ever melted them all down, they could build a small castle, or a very aggressive hedgehog. You cut the rods, heat the ends, square them on the anvil, taper the points, and hammer the heads. Over and over. Each nail only takes a minute, but the repetition chews at your shoulder like a rat. Osric tries one. It comes out bent and sad. "Looks like a question mark," you say. "I think it's asking why I'm still here," he mutters. You chuckle and let him try again. By mid-morning, your hands are numb. That's not unusual. What is unusual is the way your left leg keeps going dead. It starts at the hip, trickles down to the knee. Pins and needles. Then, nothing. You shake it out. Keep working. It's fine. Probably. Let's talk about what this job does to your body. Not just the burns and the scars and the ringing ears, but the way it slowly, relentlessly bends you out of shape. Your spine curves forward, your shoulders round, your knees ache like they've been grinding against sand for decades. Your fingers stiffen, your grip weakens. You develop what the old smiths called the blacksmith's limp, a shuffling, uneven gait that gets worse the longer you pretend it isn't happening. You used to stand straight. You remember that. People would comment on it. Now, when you walk through the market, children ask if you've been cursed. You hammer another rod into a nail and wince as your elbow twinges. Tendon strain. Probably permanent. You've wrapped it in cloth. Doesn't help. Osric asks if you need a break. You glare at him. He shuts up. You once asked your old master when the ache stopped. He laughed so hard he nearly passed out. "The pain doesn't stop," he said. "You stop." That was his version of a pep talk. By midday, you've moved on to hinges. Bigger, heavier, more finicky than they should be. The reeve wants them identical. Perfect size, smooth motion, decorative curls at the ends. Like the ones at the Lord's Manor, he said. Of course he did. Everyone wants noble results on a peasant's budget. You heat the bar, draw it out, scroll the ends and punch the pinholes. It takes forever. Your wrist cramps halfway through the second one. You shake it out and keep going. Osric is working on a batch of rivets. He drops one. It rolls across the floor and disappears into a crack beneath the bellows. He swears quietly and tries to fish it out with a bent wire. You used to care about things like lost rivets. Now, you care more about whether your lunch will be hot. Spoiler, it won't be. While the hinges cool, you sit on your stool and stare at your hands. Your knuckles are swollen. Your palms are split open in a few places. One finger doesn't bend all the way anymore. It's been that way since the time you smashed it during a rush order for crossbow bolts. You sometimes wonder what your hands would look like if you'd been born a scholar or a monk. Soft, straight, clean. But no one ever thanked a scholar for keeping their wagon from collapsing. And here's the thing. Despite everything, the body endures. Sort of. It adapts. It gets weird. Your grip, though weak, is still precise. You can still feel a blade's balance by holding it for half a second. You can still tell if iron is too brittle just by tapping it with your fingernail. You've become a strange sort of machine, half man, half habit. Some scholars write that blacksmiths were revered in their villages for their physical toughness. Others argue that they were quietly pitied, respected, but with the same grim admiration people give to executioners or plague doctors. Better them than me, the villagers think. And in the more fringe academic circles, there's a belief that blacksmiths were feared, not just because of the fire, but because of what the fire did to them. The hunched backs, the deep voices, the eyes always squinting, like the forge was slowly transforming them into something other. You don't buy into the superstition, but when you catch your reflection in a bucket of water, you do sometimes wonder when your face started looking so much like the anvil you use. Osric brings you a cup of warm ale. You accept it gratefully. "Your hand's bleeding," he says. You look down. A split in your palm has reopened, blood mixing with soot. You shrug. More seasoning for the tools. He doesn't laugh. He just offers a rag. The mercenary caravan arrives late afternoon. Loud, brash, impatient. They toss their swords on your bench like firewood and start demanding things. Sharper edges, cleaner hilts, better grips. You don't flinch. You've dealt with worse. You sharpen the blades, grind the edges, wrap the hilts in fresh leather. One of them watches you with arms crossed. A scar down his cheek. Probably earned dishonourably. You don't care. He tries to haggle. You stare him down and raise the price. He pays. Your leg is throbbing now. The numbness has returned. It spreads slowly, like cold water in your boots. You adjust your stance. Pretend it's not there. The day ends in a haze of pain, smoke, and iron. You sweep the floor, badly, and let the forge die down. The embers glow a deep red, pulsing like a tired heartbeat. The workshop smells of metal and ash and exhaustion. You slump onto your stool. Osric sits across from you, silent. Even he's too tired to talk. You look at your hands one more time. Ruined. Strong. Capable. And still willing. You close your eyes and listen to your own breath. Ragged, uneven, but steady. You'll do it all again tomorrow. Because pain isn't the end. It's just part of the work. The next morning, you wake up with dirt under your nails, ash in your beard, and an odd throb in your temple that feels suspiciously like your skull is trying to hammer its way out. Your joints crack as you sit up, and for a moment you wonder if the forge has followed you into your dreams again. It hasn't, but the aches have. You shuffle to the shop door, unlatch it, and let the pale dawn light filter in like a sigh. The street is empty, just you, the forge, and the day ahead, which, judging by the list pinned to your bench with a blacksmith's nail, is going to be less peaceful morning and more personal crusade against time. You squint at the parchment. Today, you're dealing with money, or rather the lack of it. Taxes. You hate that word more than you hate dull chisels, lazy apprentices, and people who call you iron pusher. Taxes arrive like bandits, uninvited, unwanted, and just a little too smug. The reeve is due any day now, and when he comes he expects payment in coin, not in forged nails or well-gentled, which is a problem. Because coin is something that comes and goes like a breeze through a broken doorframe. Mostly it goes. You barter for almost everything. Food, clothing, repairs. You made the cooper a new hoop for his barrel last week. In return, he fixed your leaky roof. The baker gives you bread for hinges. The weaver mends your sleeves for horseshoe nails. You do get paid in actual money sometimes, but it vanishes faster than Osric's attention span. A few pennies here, a silver half-groat there, And then the reeve shows up, asking for twice that, citing fees for market maintenance or local defence. You stare at your coin pouch. 3 coppers. You sigh. Time to prepare the tax gift. In the past, you've paid with iron rods, tools, even a small anvil once. This year, you'll try the same. You set aside a bundle of fresh nails, a pair of sturdy hinges, and a fire poker so finely made even the reeve's sour wife might smile. Osric sees you sorting the items and asks, "Why do we give stuff instead of money?" You answer with a flat tone, "Because people take from those who produce, not from those who just shuffle paper. And in a world where metal is always needed, they always take from the smith." Let's talk about medieval money, or rather, the total absurdity of it. Coinage was inconsistent at best. A silver penny in one town might be worth half that 2 valleys over. Debased coin, mixed with lesser metals, was common. You could be paid in something that looks valuable, only to be told it's not pure enough to spend elsewhere. One time you got a whole bag of silver bits, only to discover they were mostly lead. And then there's the church. Oh yes, holy men like their tithe. 10% of what you earn, or what they think you earn. Never mind that you didn't eat meat last week because the price of iron spiked. Never mind that your boots are so thin you can feel the dirt judge you. The priest still expects a contribution, plus maybe a fresh latch for the monastery gate while you're at it. The irony isn't lost on you. You forge the hinges that open the church doors, but those same doors might close on you if you don't pay. Some scholars argue that tradesmen like blacksmiths were among the most heavily burdened classes. Not quite poor enough to be pitied, not wealthy enough to be protected. You make just enough to be noticed by those who collect, but not enough to argue when they come knocking. And knock they do. A sudden rap at the door interrupts your thoughts. Osric jumps. You don't. You know that knock. You open the door, and there he is. The reeve, dressed in dusty wool, with a satchel full of scrolls and a face carved from stone. Behind him are 2 younger men, part guard, part witnesses, or muscle depending on how things go. "Morning," the reeve says, like he hasn't drained half your life's work into the town coffers. You gesture him inside. He surveys the shop with his usual disapproval, eyes flicking over the grime, the heat, the barely standing shelves like he's imagining it all replaced with marble and order. "I see you've prepared your offering," he says, eyeing the iron goods. You nod. 3 hinges, 50 nails, a fire poker. All new. He picks one up, inspects it, sniffs it, for some reason, and places it back with a grunt. It'll do. Then comes the writing. He unrolls a scroll, dips his pen and scribbles something incomprehensible. You know better than to ask what. One time you did, and he gave you a speech about property value contributions that sounded suspiciously like made-up words glued together with smugness. He signs the bottom, folds it, and hands you a slip. You're marked as paid through Michaelmas. You resist the urge to say, "Oh, joy." Instead, you nod. Then he's gone. Just like that. Off to collect from the potter or the brewer, or someone who's even worse off than you. You watch him leave and feel a strange mix of relief and shame. Relief that it's over for now. Shame that your payment wasn't enough to buy even a single loaf of bread in the market. You go back inside. Osric is staring at the remaining materials on the bench. "That's it," he says. "We give them all that, and that's just it." You shrug. That's how it works. He frowns. Seems unfair. It is. That's the thing about working for yourself. You're never really free. You answer to the nobles, the church, the reeve, the coin, the fire, the tools, the customers, the weather. You're a servant in every direction. But you're also proud, because everything you give away was made by you, by your hands, your sweat, your scars. And that means something, even if no one says so. Later that day, you get a surprise visit. The miller. His grindstone axle broke again, Second time this season. He's desperate. Offers you a full sack of flour and half a salted ham if you fix it by nightfall. You say yes, even though you're exhausted, because a hot meal and bread that doesn't taste like dust is worth its weight in silver. You set to work, shoulders aching, tools hating, tools heavy. The sun slides lower in the sky, the hammer falls, the forge breathes. The world shrinks to fire and metal once more. By the time you finish, it's dark. The miller grins, claps your back, and leaves the food behind. You sit down with the ham, the flour, and a cup of weak ale. Osric joins you, tearing off chunks of bread and dunking them with delight. "We should do this more often," he says, mouth full. You raise an eyebrow. Barter axle repair for second-rate meat? He grins. Exactly. And you realise that, even though the taxes come, and the church wants its cut, and the nobles act like you owe them the air you breathe, there's still a trade, still a way to survive, still a life to live. And maybe, just maybe, there's a knock at the forge door the next morning, not the sharp, arrogant rap of a noble steward, or the impatient pounding of a farmer with a broken tool, but a slow, tentative tap. You're in the middle of straightening a bent chisel and barely glance up. Osric pauses in his sweeping, which is actually improving, by the way. Fewer nails have vanished under the floorboards this week. You open the door and find yourself staring at an elderly woman in a faded green shawl, her hair braided into a thick silver rope that hangs over one shoulder. In her hand is a small iron ring, twisted, blackened, and cracked straight through. She holds it up. They say you fix things. You look at the ring. It's not much. Looks like it once held together a latch or maybe hung from a chain. Nothing fancy, no noble crest, no polished finish, just a simple iron ring. Functional, Wyatt, almost invisible. You nod. I do. She hands it over carefully, like it's made of glass, and says, "It was my husband's." You understand. No more questions. You repair the ring that afternoon. It doesn't take long. Just a little heat, a little shaping, a little patience. You could have melted it down, made it new, but you don't. You keep the curve imperfect, the crack now smoothed but still visible, like a scar healed over. When she comes to collect it, you hand it back without a word. She presses it to her lips, nods, and slips you a coin so old it might predate your anvil. You don't argue. You just let her leave. And in that moment, you're reminded that not everything you fix has to be sharp, or strong, or practical. Sometimes, it just needs to matter. People think blacksmiths only deal in swords and horseshoes, that it's all about power and toughness and brute force. But the truth is, half the time, you're repairing what no one else notices, little broken links in the chain of village life. That gate latch on the widow's pantry, you fixed it last year when the hinge snapped in the frost. She paid you with gooseberry jam and a story about her childhood. That rusted shutter pin on the schoolhouse window, you replaced it quietly one night after hearing the teacher curse the wind. That dented cooking spit that the innkeeper refused to throw away, you straightened it while your dinner stewed in his hearth. You've become a quiet part of people's memories, a background presence in their lives. They don't always know your name, but they know that when something breaks, they bring it here, to you. Here's something strange. In parts of the old world, people believed blacksmiths had the power to bind things beyond metal. Marriages, for example. There were ceremonies where couples would have their hands clasped with a warmed iron ring made by the local smith. Symbolic, sure, but also a subtle nod to what you really do. Keep things from falling apart. Some scholars claim this belief was rooted in the smith's role as a liminal figure, someone who worked between elements, fire and water, earth and air, creation and destruction. You stand at the crossroads of transformation, reshaping the world one strike at a time. You wouldn't say all that out loud, of course. But sometimes it feels true. Later that day, a messenger from the abbey arrives, hooded, hunched, riding a tired mule. He wants a set of iron nails, thick ones, long enough to hold the beams of a new addition to the chapel roof. You agree to make them, but when you ask when they're needed, he says, "By dawn." You resist the urge to laugh. He doesn't. You give him the usual line, "I'll do what I can." The minute he leaves, Osric groans. "We're not sleeping tonight, are we?" "Nope." You drag the iron rods over. Heavy, cold, thick as your thumb. These are no ordinary nails. They're meant for timbers the size of tree trunks. Each one must be straight, strong, and perfectly tapered. The forge fire burns hotter than usual tonight. You feed it constantly. The bellows groan with overwork. The shop is a furnace. You lose track of time. The world shrinks again, to hammer, tongs, anvil, water, repeat. Osric dozes off at the grindstone, face resting on his arm, hair dotted with ash like snowfall. You keep going, and while the nails heat, your mind drifts to a story your master once told you, about a blacksmith in a far-off land who was asked to forge the nails for a king's crucifixion. He didn't want to. He delayed, stalled, refused. But the king's men threatened to kill his family, so he made them. The story ends with the smith going mad. Every time he heard a hammer, he wept. You don't know if it's true. Probably isn't. But as you quench another nail and watch the steam rise like a ghost, you wonder. Because sometimes the things you make go on to do things you never intended. Swords you forged might spill innocent blood. Chains you shaped might bind the wrong prisoner. And nails might outlive the structures they hold together. You finish the last of the bat just as the first hints of dawn light begin to stretch across the sky. The messenger returns, looking fresher than he should. He loads the nails into a canvas satchel and nods without thanks. You don't expect one. You lean against the doorframe, arms limp, head buzzing. Osric stirs, groggy and grumbling, and asks, "Why didn't you say no?" You shrug. Because roofs fall on people. He doesn't have an answer for that. No one ever does. As the sun rises, you look at your forge, your tools, your soot-covered apprentice, and your cracked, blistered hands. And for a moment, just a flicker, you feel proud. Not because anyone told you to be. Not because anyone clapped you on the back or sang your name at the tavern. But because the village still stands. Because that roof will stay up. Because somewhere out there someone is safe, warm and sheltered because of a nail you shaped in the dead of night. And maybe that's the best kind of legacy. One no one sees. But that holds everything together. It's the end of the week and you're standing outside the forge, staring up at the sky like it owes you money. Your legs are heavy, your hands are stiff. Your back feels like someone hammered a horseshoe into it sideways. You've been awake so long you've forgotten what silence feels like. Even now, in the stillness of early evening, your ears echo with ghostly clangs and the lingering hiss of quenched metal. Osric is scrubbing soot off a bench with a rag that's just moving the grime around in artistic swirls. You don't stop him. It's less about cleaning and more about ritual. Scrubbing to mark the end of another week, to say, "We survived again." You glance at the to-do list nailed to the post beside the door. It's stained, torn, and almost illegible, but every item has a strike through it. Except one. You sigh. The mill wheel. Osric groans. Still. The miller has been pestering you about that wheel hub for 3 days. It cracked last spring, and you've been patching it ever since. But this time it's worse. One side's warped lined misaligned, and the rivets are pulling free like the whole thing's trying to escape into the river. You know what that means. Another custom part. Big, awkward, heavy. And because it's for the mill, it's also urgent. You drag the broken piece from the pile of pending work, and Osric helps you roll it inside. It's splintered, half-burned, and smells like old flour and regret. The iron hub ring is warped so badly it looks like a snail shell. and the support brackets have bent in strange ways that defy geometry. "Who did this?" Osric asks. "The wheel. The wheel did this. It hates us." He laughs, and you pretend you're not already calculating how much iron you'll need to fix it. Because you are. It's always your job to fix things that shouldn't have broken in the first place. You start reshaping the hub ring while Osric prepares a new set of braces. Sparks fly, metal groans, and your elbows protest. The part isn't glamorous, but it matters. The mill is essential. No wheel, no flour. No flour, no bread. And no bread? Riots. Or at least a lot of very loud hunger complaint. You remember when the mill jammed last winter. Half the village showed up with sacks of frozen grain and open threats. You patched the shaft with a salvaged hinge and prayed it would hold through February. It did. Barely. Now, here you are again. You hammer out a new flange, reshape the ring, and rehaul the bracket holes. The anvil echoes with the rhythmic sounds you know better than your own breathing. It's all familiar. The sharp sting of metal against metal, the smell of hot iron, the clatter of hammers tossed aside just a bit. Osric brings you rivets. They're uneven. "Try again," you mutter. He takes them without complaint. You keep working. Eventually you pause, look up, realize the sun has set. Again. You haven't eaten. Again. But the piece is nearly done. You wrap a damp cloth around your hand and lift the finished hub. It's hot, heavy, solid. It's also beautiful in its own crooked, utilitarian way. You don't make art. You don't make things to admire from a distance. But there's pride here, a kind of silent craftsmanship that says, "I was made by someone who gave a damn." You leave it on the cooling table and finally sit. Osric slumps beside you, eyes half closed, hands grey with grime. "Do people ever thank you?" he asks. You tilt your head. Sometimes. You think. There was that farmer who nodded once and said, "Good shoe." That monk who blessed you after you fixed the abbey's cracked bell. The child who waved after you repaired her mother's pot handle. Little moments, quiet ones. "Not often," you say. Does it bother you? You look at your hands, at the forge, at the piece cooling beside you. No. It's not that you don't want thanks. It's just, the work is its own kind of reward. Tangible. Real. You can hold it, feel its weight, know it will outlast you. Some scholars say medieval blacksmiths left behind the most durable legacies. Churches crumbled, castles fell. But tools, hinges, nails, they stayed buried in the earth, rusted but intact, long after names faded from memory. You like that idea, that something of you might outlive the forgetting. Here's a curious historical debate. Were blacksmiths respected in their communities or merely tolerated? Some records suggest they were essential and valued, often granted privileges like land use or tax exemptions. Others suggest they were seen as borderline outcasts, too dirty, too loud, too close to dangerous elements. You felt both. The respect, when something needs to be done. The suspicion, when things go wrong. When the Reeves cartwheel broke, it was your fault. When the knight's blade dulled, it was your steel. When the barn burned, well, what other fire nearby could have caused it? You bear it all. Because you have to. Because your work holds up the village, even when the village forgets who's holding it. Osric stretches and asks, "Will I end up like you?" You glance at him. "Only if you're lucky." He makes a face. "You'll hate it," you continue. "It'll hurt. You'll burn things you didn't know you had. Your friends will leave for easier trades. People will call you gruff, dirty, old. You'll fall asleep in chairs and wake up with soot in your mouth." He stares at you. "But," you say, "you'll never wonder if your work matters." Silence. Then he nods. Slowly, that sound. Fair. You nod back. The forge dies down. You leave it that way. The shop is warm with residual heat, and you let it breathe. Let the night settle over your tools, your bench, your anvil. You stand, stretch, and turn to the back corner, where the old cracked armour still hangs from a wooden peg. You made it years ago, wore it once, tested it, repaired it, never sold it, never could. Too many dents, too many stories. You run your fingers over the breastplate, tracing the groove left by a clumsy sword strike during a tournament demo. You remember the bruises that followed. You laughed back then. You still do. There's something about armour, real armour, that stays with you, not just the kind you forge for knights and nobles, but the kind you wear inside. The calluses, the steady hands, the resilience, the silence. That's the armour of a blacksmith. Built, not born. Earned. You grab a blanket and toss it over your shoulders, not because it's cold, but because it feels like the right thing to do. You glance at Osric. He's fallen asleep, sitting up again, mouth open, soot on his forehead like war paint. You should wake him. But instead, you stoke the coals one last time, not to work, just to keep the heat alive. A soft glow. A heartbeat. A promise. That tomorrow, the forge will wake again. And so will you. The dawn arrives not as a gentle friend, but as a relentless taskmaster, pulling you from the thin, restless sleep you managed to claim the night before. Your body protests in every creak and ache, but you're already moving because there's no time to wait. The forge cools, the metal waits, and the village's quiet heartbeat depends on your steady hands. You light the fire again, its flickering flames dancing in the dimness like the restless spirits you've heard whispered about in old tales. The heat pushes back the cold and fills the space with the familiar scent of coal and iron, a smell so ingrained in your life it's almost a part of your skin. Osric is awake, though barely. His eyes are heavy, the lines around them deepening from too many nights spent watching you hammer away. He stirs slowly, the ragged breath of a boy learning to carry the weight you've borne for so long. The day ahead is full. Sword repairs, horseshoes, a new order for ploughshares, and a request from the church for metal fittings on their bells. The variety of work is a constant, a steady reminder that this trade is not just a job, but the fabric holding the village together. As you prepare your tools, your mind drifts briefly to the countless smiths who came before you, their names lost, their faces forgotten, but their work etched into the bones of the earth. Every nail driven, every blade forged, every horseshoe nailed down is a silent legacy, passed from hand to hand. Your apprentice watches intently as you take up the hammer, the rhythmic clang filling the forge once more. Each strike sends a pulse through your arms, through your body, a tangible connection to the craft, to the fire, to the enduring spirit of creation born from flame and sweat. You think of the stories told in hushed tones, of blacksmiths as keepers of ancient secrets, wielders of fire's transformative power, and guardians of the delicate balance between creation and destruction. These tales, half legend and half reality, have shaped the respect and fear that follow you through the village streets. But beyond the myths lies the raw truth. This work is grueling, often thankless, and relentless. It carves you into a living testament of endurance, scarred hands, ringing ears, a body bowed by years of labour. And yet, in the quiet moments, there is profound pride. Pride in shaping the tools that feed the hungry, defend the helpless, and build the future. Pride in being the unseen foundation beneath every thriving home and sturdy fence. As the sun climbs higher, warming the earth and brightening the forge's glow, you find a rare moment to pause. The sweat on your brow is mingled with soot, your clothes heavy with the weight of another day's toil, but your heart carries a steady rhythm, a testament to resilience. You look over at Osric, who mirrors your tired determination, and you know this is more than a craft passed down. It is a legacy forged in fire and will. The forge will call again tomorrow, as it always does. The flames will rise, the hammer will fall, and the work will continue. Lucky, unyielding, eternal. You close your eyes briefly, letting the quiet hum of the forge soothe the ache in your bones. This is your story, the story of the blacksmith, of fire and metal, pain and pride, endurance and legacy. And as your breath slows, the world softens around you. You are safe. You have endured. You are home.